Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. Today I have a very special unboxing, but not really unboxing. Um, and I actually want to dedicate this video to Jerry the Jitterbug. Okay. And it'll make all sense in a second once I show you what I already unboxed. I already unboxed it. It came in the mail. I was like, oh, it's just one comic. I'll open it up, see what it is. And I forgot that I had even ordered this. Actually, I did remember ordering it, but I didn't realize that it was coming to my Canadian address. But it makes sense that it came to my Canadian address because it is a Canadian comic and it is a very interesting comic that deserves its whole video for itself. And I got it actually very inexpensively. And I paid $45 for this book. This book is insanely rare. There's 0 on the census. And it's not like that it's one of those books that people wouldn't grade. It is one that if they ever found, they would grade it because it is it is just a piece of history. I'm going to show you the book, and I'll get into a little bit of the history about the book and a little bit of history about an unknown era in Canadian comics. So this is Whiz Spy Smasher, Volume 4, Number 7. It's a great Captain Marvel cover. It is in horrible shape. This is in like, I would say like a 1.0, maybe 0.5 grade. It's really in rough shape. It's complete, but the spine is completely split. You can see that there's big chunk missing out of the spine as well. I tried opening up. The pages inside actually are pretty like they're not as brittle as I would have expected. The cover, though, is insanely brittle. It is just ready to fall apart, which is kind of sad. It is a great book, and the image for it is pretty strong. Like you can see, Captain Marvel quite well done. I'm going to give you a little bit of history of this book. So I was lucky to get it for the price that I paid for it is a great price. The company, I'm not sure if you can see it, but I'm going to zoom in. Right up here, it's AA Comics. Now, AA Comics is Anglo-American Comics. They were a company that really got started after the War Exchange law came in, Act, it's called the Act. War Exchange Act came into play in Canada. What happened was during the Second World War, supplies were very limited. So we didn't import stuff from the US in terms of paper. And so comics were not brought in from the US into Canada. And what that meant was there was this weird shortage of reading material for kids. There was no comics for kids to read. So some Toronto company called Anglo-American decided, hey, we'll start a company and we'll start publishing books in Canada. Now, they got the rights to publish with Fawcett stories in Canada. So they got like Spy Smasher and Captain Marvel. And they produced it under their own brand. So this was for Canadians in Canada. And the problem was, and these are part of an era called the Golden Age of Canadian comics. What happened was, during this time, as I said, there was an embargo. You couldn't bring anything from the US. There was a handful of Canadian publishers that took up the task of producing comics for kids. And the most famous is Bell Features, but also AA and Maple Leaf Publishing also. Those are the kind of the 3 big ones. All of them went defunct after the embargo was lifted. And American comics started flooding into Canada. AA Comics basically went defunct in 1951, so a few years later. But they just couldn't survive they couldn't compete against their American counterparts. But that era, from 1941 to like early 1950s, was considered the golden age of Canadian comics. And the comics were known as the Canadian Whites. And the reason they were called Canadian Whites is the paper that they used was generally white paper. and it was like what they had to use at the time. It was different than the paper that they would use in the US, which was a standard comic paper. And as a result, a lot of these comics were lost because the paper quality, especially for the covers, was very subpar. It was very low quality paper, and they would disintegrate, like literally disintegrate over time. And so these things are like considered a piece of Canadian history, a major part of Canadian culture. And the interesting thing was companies like AA Publishing, they would also produce characters other than the ones that they had licensing rights to, and they would produce original stories for the Canadian audience. So a lot of these Golden Age heroes that were created for Canadians were also lost to time. And so the Golden Age and the Canadian whites was kind of a major part of Canadian history that was kind of lost to the time. The government has recently, like maybe a few years back, put out a series of stamps to celebrate the Canadian whites and that era of the Golden Age of comics for Canada. But yeah, it's really hard to find one of these comics. And this is my first. This is the first one of these I have in my collection. And it's just really cool to have something that's a little bit of Canadiana. And it's really a rare book. As I said, 0 on the census. You just don't see these very often. And it's one of those things that if you can find it, pick it up, because it's they're rare, and there are collectors for this, especially Canadians. So I wanted to now express my hope that Jerry the Jitterbug will see this piece of Canadian history as a pet project. So I'd like to send this to Jerry and see if he could possibly bring it back to life. It is in pretty rough shape. I know that he has some magic that he can cast on this book and maybe bring it back to life. I would also like to submit it to CGC and see if we can get 1 on the census for this book. So yeah, I really want to see if this book can be brought back to life. I'd like to see it restored. And I hope that Jerry will take interest. So Jerry, if you're watching this video is for you, really. And I hope that you will accept my challenge that I send this book off to you, and you will be willing to restore it and give it back some life. I might send you a little thank you if you do this. So, this is my very short unboxing, but I hope you enjoyed a little bit of Canadian history and a little bit of comic history. And I think this is a really great book. I did open it up. It is really just a fun piece of history to read and to enjoy. I wish I was very paranoid because the cover is completely split, but it is really great. So I'm hoping that it can be brought back to life. Thanks again for watching, and please check out my other videos and comment and all that kind of stuff. Thanks again for watching. Bye.